UFC fighters may be known for fighting in the ring, but that doesn't stop them from going at it even when they're not doing their job. One feud that seems to have escalated quite a bit is the one between Mike Jackson and Jake Shields. What was just verbal spats is now looking to be transforming into something much more serious. In this video, we'll uncover what went down between the rivals. First up, Mike Jackson reveals former UFC champion is challenging him to a fight. Mike Jackson, a welterweight in the UFC, has recently drawn the attention of many MMA veterans. Since The Truth was defeated by Pete Rodriguez in October, he hasn't competed. At the time, Jackson's defeat was a setback because he had been on a 2-fight winning streak prior to that. Although the occasional boxer won't be out for very long because he's now run into Jake Shields. Over the past few months, the former UFC championship contender and the Houston native have exchanged words back and forth. Jackson claimed that the former Strikeforce champion was a while Shields claimed that Jackson is a bigot. On Friday, the conflict went beyond verbal exchanges. At the UFC Performance Institute, the two men got into a fight. Shields, for his part, made a video of the altercation in which he fired some shots at Jackson as he lay on the ground. But later, the UFC welterweight claimed that the retired combatant had attacked him and that he would file a police report, while Shields was also said to have been expelled from the Performance Institute. Fans have paid close attention to the incident, and Pat Miletich appears to have noticed it as well. A former friend of the welterweight, The Truth explained in an interview with MMA Junkie that their friendship appears to have ended. The fighter stated that he has no idea why the was texting him about upcoming fights and about boxing and kickboxing, and that's when he finally challenged him to a kickboxing bout just so he could shut him up. Coming up, Pat has sent texts like that before too. Sure, Jackson could fight Pat in MMA and win as well, but he doesn't want to waste his time there. What Jackson really wants to do is kickbox his ex-friend for speaking nonsense for no reason. He revealed that Pat Miletich would text him at like 1 in the morning randomly and would say some wild stuff. The only thing that the boxer wanted to say to him was to fall asleep and leave him alone. So he plans to finish up his current business, make some money, and after that, he'll turn his attention to the white nationalist who seems to have nothing better to do than text him at 1 in the morning. Next up, Matt Brown sides with Shields over a fight with Jackson. Fighting, according to Matt Brown, is the answer to every problem. This is especially true when someone insults you in person or online, which is why the 14-year UFC veteran has decided to support Jake Shields in their current dispute with Mike Jackson, who provoked a physical brawl between the two fighters at the UFC Performance Institute in Las Vegas. The instigating event began on Twitter, as most things tend to do. While Shields and Jackson have different views on how the dispute actually began, on social media, Jackson referred to Shields as a and a white supremacist, which sparked a dispute when they both happened to be working out at the same gym. In Fighter vs. the Writer, Brown made it clear that he was on Jake's side. According to him, Jackson was saying stuff about him that was just unacceptable. While he knows that Jake says some really crazy stuff on Twitter, that still isn't a proper excuse for him to label Jake a which is something he's definitely not. He went on to explain that Shields may say some things that Jackson wouldn't always agree with. In fact, it's common that people don't always have the same views about various matters, which is why we disagree on matters and argue. But how did he think it was okay to say what Jackson had and expect Shields to do nothing about it? Of course he would retaliate. Coming up, Brown thinks Shields and Jackson will surely fight in the near future. Brown thinks Jackson should have realized that by disparaging another boxer, the inevitable outcome would likely be a fight if the two ever cross paths. Jackson competes in the UFC, and when he attacked Shields with his words, he offered his rival an invitation to fight him in an upcoming event. What does he expect Jake to do now except fight him? If Jackson had plans to compete in the UFC, then he would have to deal with the consequences of his words, which in this case could be a fight against Shields whenever they cross paths. While Brown may not always agree with what other fighters post on social media, and this includes Shields, he was still aware that doing what Jackson did would almost certainly result in a fight. Brown thinks that Shields was likely to lash out if they ever got into close proximity, and that Jackson's blunder truly amounted to name-calling when he labeled Shields a and started calling him names, which wasn't okay even if the two were arguing online. Such name-calling could result in a fight amongst the usual crowd, but was much more likely in cases of professional fighters. Jackson was just opening the door for such attacks when he attacked Shields online. Following up, Jackson should just suck it up. Simply put, Brown thinks Jackson is making a mountain out of a molehill. The fighter expressed his wish to file charges in connection with the incident, while Shields has said that he has talked to a lawyer about possibly bringing a defamation complaint. In Brown's opinion, he feels like the fight itself should have settled the problem, and Jackson should just own what happened and let it go. He explained that if it was him, he would just go up to Jackson and tell him he was just scared. Jackson was wrong to attack Shields, and Brown thinks it's time for him to own up to his mistakes. He used fighting words to get to him, so why can't he accept the consequences now? Brown added that there was no shame in losing to Shields, and Jackson needed to let it go. Moving on, Shields' response to Mike Jackson's lies. Of course, Shields didn't stay quiet once Jackson's words were made public. The former Strikeforce champion responded to his statements following the altercation at the UFC Performance Institute. Shields ran into Jackson during a training session after several heated Twitter exchanges involving accusations of racism. So when the two finally met up after their heated dialogue, the situation finally became physical. Shields shared a short video on social media in which he was seen on top of Jackson to prove that he came out as the winner. Shields clarified that before their interaction on Twitter, he had never heard of Mike. He told MMA Junkie that Jackson began calling him a for no apparent reason, and while normally he would simply block someone who called him that, he was unable to ignore that he was a part of the fight industry. He knows that he's extremely respected in the fight industry, and for the most part, everyone loves him too. So who was this guy who had called him something he wasn't? Shields elaborated that no one had ever called him a racist, and they never will because he doesn't give him a chance. So for this guy in his industry who thought he could get away with it, lessons had to be taught. He warned Jackson that when they met, there would be consequences. Next up, what did Jackson and Shields have to say about the altercation? Jackson stated in separate phone interviews with MMA Fighting that Shields spat on him twice before he was also ambushed by the ex-UFC fighter and a teammate, resulting in a brief grappling tussle that everyone's seen circulating on social media. According to Jackson, he was going to the PI for the second time since undergoing facial surgery, following a knockout loss in his last UFC fight. When Shields entered the training area, Jackson claimed that he began to yell at him from across the room, but he didn't want to participate and risk complications due to his recent surgery. But Jackson had not expected Shields to just attack him right then and there. He thought that because the two were in a professional environment, they would deal with the matter more calmly or wait until a fight was scheduled. But Shields had other plans and jeopardized his position in the UFC. Jackson blamed Shields' fragile white nationalist ego for being unable to handle the matter. And finally, what did Shields say about the fight? Shields claimed he was punched after he challenged Jackson to a fight in the PI's cage, which caused the physical altercation to begin. While most of the two stories don't match up, they both agreed that when Jackson called Shields a things escalated. He explained that when he saw Jackson at the PI, Shields walked right up to him and challenged him right then to a fight. He claimed that Jackson was making excuses and that he wouldn't fight. Instead, he tried to get away and stated that he was told that they would fight in Houston, but not now. When Shields tried to goad the fighter into coming into the cage for a fight, he called him a and that's when things got out of hand. Shields stepped out of the cage and walked up to him and slapped him. He explained that at no point did he punch Jackson, who was trying to gouge his eyes out while he screamed for help from the people around him. Even though he wanted to slap him some more, Shields was finally pulled off Jackson. While he doesn't deny hitting the fighter, he does deny attacking him from behind. In short, both have accused the other of lying about what actually occurred. Of course, the fight was noticed by the UFC as well. According to them, Shields has been barred from competing in the UFC PI as a result of the altercation. While Shields does feel bad for starting the fight in a professional environment, he knows that he would have beaten Jackson up some more had there been no consequences. And with all that, that's a wrap for this video. Who do you think was wrong in the feud between Mike Jackson and Jake Shields? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.